So, with that, I want to introduce Brent Baude, one of the leading lights of our container tools development at Red Hat, and somebody who has been tinkering around with containers since before Docker was announced. Who's going to talk a little bit about container history and where it fits into modern infrastructure. So welcome, Brent.
Thank you. I assume you can hear me okay? Just one final check?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Okay. So welcome, everyone. This is Container Plumbers Days 2023. We got the last year off. But I look forward to a more yearly function. What I hope for folks is that the entire conference serve as and not only an opportunity to learn about things people are doing, but also to inspire them, to have them look at technologies that they wouldn't normally be looking at, and in the most of ideal worlds, help by contributing to these projects and continuing their development, whether it's contributing code or documentation or testing scenarios and things like that. Everyone has something they can help with. So as Josh said, I'll be speaking about some of the trends. I'll stay out of the history. I'm not hoping not to give a containers history redo that is frequently done. I would kind of like to look at maybe the last year or so and what's going on now and then forward. And I'll wrap up with a few trends or a few problems rather that I see that the container world's going to have to kind of get over the top of to really, really begin to shine. So with that, I'll start. I'm Brent Baude. I'm the Podman architect, and I joined Red Hat almost 9 years ago now. I came from IBM after 17 years in the Rochester, Minnesota site, including their labs and offices there. I worked on a little everything there. Started on something called Network Station and a little thing called AS400, and worked on everything from TCP/IP security to negotiating contracts. Very varied career there. Since coming to Red Hat, I've largely worked with containers in some way or another. The beginning was certainly around the atomic distro and the atomic project. That was really the most structured container work I started at that point. I am now a member of the Container Runtimes team for Red Hat, and we work on Podman, Builda, Scopio, container storage, containers image, Netavark, Aardvark, and probably several more that I'm missing, but our team tries to keep our arms around that. And I'm also a maintainer and contributor to the Podman project. I do also contribute to Netavark and Aardvark as well, which is Podman's new networking stack. By new, I mean within the last year. So it's become pretty clear that containers are ubiquitous now. People don't know they're running containers and they're running them, which is probably a very good success story. But what we're also starting to see is not just the traditional use case of I want to run a process that's been sandboxed or namespaced or secured. I don't want to run just a simple service. I want to run specialized containers, or I want to run something like Flatpak that's going to allow me to listen to Spotify so that when I'm coding, I can listen to robot music. But we're also starting to see some sort of trends coming together, in particular of these non-traditional uses. And I thought I'd just highlight a couple of them. The first is the auto industry and dealing with their onboard screen in the vehicle, as well as the various functions inside of the auto that need to be done. And Red Hat has recently, in the last year or so, launched an initiative and investment into that space, and is beginning to start to see outputs from that collaboration with the auto industry into actual projects now. And it seems to be quite a good match. The auto industry has, in the example of Podman, has pushed us to contemplate things like performance and other considerations that we would not have normally taken a long look at. We're also seeing plenty of containers being used in embedded spaces like storage area networks, storage controllers, networking gear like routers and firewalls. And those are things that can't have hiccups. So it suggests that they're having a very reliable experience with containers, and these things have begun to prove very effective there as well. And finally, which I think most people are aware of, I don't think I'm saying too much that's new, that containers on the edge has been working very well. We've got devices in various locations that you might imagine are inaccessible normally, whether it be a tower or some location in extremely hot or cold areas. And here we find that the certainly been a success for using containers as almost as a package and installation media, and the ability to be able to deliver the same thing to every node, and the ability to be able to back out of that change has proven to be also quite effective. The big push on the desktop of late has, if you'll allow me, changed the game. Certainly, Docker Desktop was the leading project here without much competition. And within the last few years, they've made some changes, as have other projects, to where new desktops, if you will, new desktop experiences around containers have begun to pop up. Here I'm just showing a picture of the Podman desktop, which is a new product that is going around, or a new upstream project rather, that's been developed late last year and early this year. The desktop really seems to tap a new audience. We see a lot of people using desktop container programs to be able to do simple developer experience type things, whether it would be to compile on a different tool chain or a different architecture. Containers are very effective in that space. The desktop, however, also allows for complicated tasks to be simplified when it has good GUI design. And I think that will in the end be something that really proves itself in all the desktop designs. Speaking of which, the presentation after the opening, it happens to be about Podman Desktop. You might check that out. It's being done by Stevan and Florent, and they also will be sort of showing off some Kubernetes related stuff as well. And then you'll also see on the desktop side, Christoph talking about VFKit, which is sort of a library and executable that deals with the Apple hypervisor. And even with the desktop, we still have our CLI junkies, and we love them. Ashley and Arashi will talk about Podman CLI and the improvements that were made, largely because of Podman desktop requirements. Also on the desktop, we can't forget about Windows containers. There's a appropriately titled "Do Not Forget About Windows Containers" that Jamie will talk about as well. So some trends that we're certainly seeing, I think some of these would be no new news to folks. Many of these trends are kind of in their infancy and really haven't realized their potential. But I think in the next year or so, we will begin to see some of that. So what we're seeing now is specialization, where containers are being used for very specific purposes. And some of those might be that they are created for a single purpose or for a long time running purpose. But something like Quadlet, which was born out of the auto industry collaboration, is a very specific tooling. And then we have all the various stuff going on with WASM. And you'll hear about that should you attend Adi and Giuseppe's presentation tomorrow. We certainly see an increased demand by folks around security of containers, particularly to those who have held off but no longer can in terms of evaluating the technology. We've got financial markets, banking, government, kinds of folks that have very unique, or at least they believe they do, very unique security requirements, and they want to know how to deal with them. Generally, this has been covered by the containers community already, but every once in a while, something new and eye raising will kind of come through there, and we'll have to contend with. So we're definitely seeing in the security world stuff like confidential workloads being highlighted, and there will be an excellent talk from Sergio on that. We see security scanners being asked about to detect malware or exploitive code. And another thing that the conference will have is the hash-based detection by Holger and Kevin, which should be a rather interesting take on looking inside the contents of a container image. Thirdly, the OCI artifacts. This comes with reasonably recent developments around OCI artifacts and the fact that container images don't have to be just container images. We can use container registries to pull artifacts down as well. So it's not just a big blob of layers for a container image anymore. There may be other things going on. One of the very exciting areas for me is our collaboration with the OS Tree team and our use of Podman Machine, which is our virtual machine approach to being able to run on Windows and Mac primarily. This new approach with OCI artifacts will change not only how we deliver the machine image, but also how we will customize them for particular hypervisors, or allow users to frankly customize themselves with a couple of Podman commands and a reboot, and you got it. So be sure to check out all the talks about OCI artifacts tomorrow. Colin will talk about Boot C, which is now kind of coming behind this work and starting to pull together several aspects of it. And there's also a discussion from Brandon about attaching OCI artifacts to container images, which is sort of basically what I'm talking about right now. And finally, Kubernetes. Kubernetes has always been, to a lot of people, particularly those of us that focus on single node container tools, it's always been a bit of a big YAML blob, hard to maybe understand until you sit down and have to use it. But we've got this desktop now that is nearly the perfect tool for demystifying the use of K8s and making it just so much easier for users that could never contemplate that experience. Should be now able to do deployments out to Kubernetes. And I assume that that's going to be an area that will continue that collaboration of single node and tools and GUI leading to Kubernetes usage and deployments. And finally, here I'd like to talk about some things in the future that we as a community have to get over the hurdle on. These problems, as I see them, are not typically technical in nature. We, in fact, for some of them, already have solutions for these problems, and either they're just not being implemented or they're not being adopted. The first one that is been around for a while is the multi-arch image registries. With the inclusion of desktops, and if we just look at Macs and really Windows too, Macs still have a very large install base on the Intel platform with Intel processors. And with now Apple Silicon, there's a need for AArch64 or ARM64. And right now, almost all image registries build specifically for x86 64 and rely on users to push the ARM64 images. We also have sort of a lack of the use of manifest lists. People are trying to do the multi-arch approach with either labels or in the container name. This just makes consuming those images much more difficult. And as a corollary of this topic, you'll hear Sil and Ovidiu tomorrow talk about ARM64 kind of being a second-class citizen in the container world. Surely the generally slower I/O and things like that will be part of this. Is one of the problems with AArch, and perhaps availability of hardware would be another limiting factor for registries. But this is, in my opinion, this is going to happen at least for the desktop architectures in the near future. We talk about secure supply chain, particularly financial markets and banking, and some of those that I mentioned earlier around security. These folks really want provenance and trust to be established with the container images they're going to run. And here is a topic where we do have the technology more or less put together. It just has not been widely adopted yet. Things like cosign would be a good example. And until these things are employed by everyone and it becomes the de facto, as opposed to an opt-in, it would become an opt-out. Until that really occurs, I think that we'll continue to struggle with this subject and we'll continue to be sort of frayed on our response as a community. So in this area, to me, this is an area where the community has to come together and probably make some hard decisions and figure out how one or more of these technologies could be used in tandem. And then finally, the image deduplication is something our team talks about quite a bit. Again, here we've got technologies that do solve these problems. It's more of a case where the tooling, the image registries, and so forth need to get on the same page. But as this group very well knows, when you pull a very large image and then you pull another similar image, you end up with a whole bunch of content down on your system that chews up quite a bit of space, and of course consumed a lot of bandwidth to get there. So things like ComposeFS offers a feature in terms of limiting the amount of I/O activity and disk space. And there are certainly also technologies for registries to not send everything, but only really the deltas between images. And those adoptions need to occur, and they need to, I believe, occur both in the registry and with the clients. So I'll field questions. That's kind of what I had to speak about today. I wanted to sort of just get the conversation going, see if we can't hit a few topics that folks are thinking about, but we give them an opportunity to maybe push them along. And like I said, I really hope that on a couple of these topics we can get serious enough as a community to begin to get over some of these problems that has, in my opinion, kind of kept containers at arm's length. And for me, will be one of the key steps we need to take to sort of close that gap. I would be happy to field questions and tell you what I think or know from here.
Thank you very much, Brent. Unfortunately, we're running into the next
Oh,
session.
yes, we are.
Which is starting. So you actually have to, folks actually need to join the next session.
Yes.
Podman Desktop Simplifying the Experience. That said, Brent will still be around in the event chat. And will probably be joining the next session. So if you have questions for him, ask those in the chat. And see you over in the Podman Desktop session. Thanks,
yes,
everyone.